On the line with us is former Congressman Barr. He used to represent Georgia's 7th District. He's an attorney. He's a member of the board of directors of the National Rifle Association. In 2002, which I think was around the last time you were in Congress, I see Open Secrets lists you as the top recipient of gun rights money, Congressman Barr. It's obviously something that you have been passionate about for some time. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you. I am passionate about the Second Amendment and all the other parts of our Bill of Rights, which are all, in many respects, intertwined.
So when is the leadership of the NRA going to basically atone for your sins, to come out and apologize to the American people and go back to your pre-1974-75 positions in which you called for, the NRA used to be advocates for reasonable control of guns?
Well, I'm not quite sure what all of the charges leveled at the NRA are these days, but it all boils down to the fact that the left has a deep and abiding animosity toward the Second Amendment and toward any organization, including the NRA, that advocates for Second Amendment rights. So I suspect that, as with President Trump, there's really nothing that we can do to satisfy them, that is, our critics.
Well, I'm just asking if you or your colleagues are ever going to apologize for facilitating mass murder in the United States. We're the only developed country in the world that has this problem. We're also, 4.4% of the world's population, and we have half the world's guns in civilian hands. There's a clear correlation there, and there have been multiple studies on this. Back in '93, when the Centers for Disease Control came to this conclusion, 2 years later, Congressman Dickey put his amendment into the appropriations bill saying, we can no longer investigate guns as a public health issue as a result of NRA, sponsoring him. He has since, published an op-ed in the Washington Post saying, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. Isn't it time for the NRA to say the same thing?
The Centers for Disease Control was set up after World War II in order to study diseases, and in particular some of those that were afflicting the southern United States, trying to shoehorn into a government bureaucracy or government agency that is supposed to be studying diseases, guns, and gun control, to me is inappropriate.
Actually, the phrase that's in their charter is public health, and you don't think that 20, 30,000, well, last year was 40,000 people dying because of guns, gun deaths, 40,000 gun deaths, is a public health crisis? I mean,
well, you could include automobile deaths. You can include drug overdoses.
Yep.
You can include
absolutely.
All
and the CDC has looked at all those things. They do. That's part of their public health portfolio.
And I think that's entirely inappropriate. I think it's inappropriate to set up a government agency with a charter to study diseases, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and then put all of these other things on top of that and say, well...
So are you suggesting that there should be a separate agency that is charged with looking at public health crises, 50,000 automobile deaths as a result of alcohol, 450,000 cancer deaths and heart disease deaths as a result of tobacco, 40,000 deaths as a result of guns? Is that what you're advocating? Or are you saying we simply shouldn't even look at these things so that we can't come up with reasonable policies to deal with them?
A lot of it really boils down, Tom, to what is the proper role for the federal government. I don't think that it's appropriate, and I'm not advocating that the federal government not involve itself in studying true public health issues. What I am saying is if Congress decides on behalf of the American people by majority votes and the president signs legislation saying that this is a particular problem that we want to devote funds and public resources to, then fine. Let Congress do that and let a president sign it. But thus far, the Congress of the United States, in responding to the desires of the American people and representing those views, we don't want the government to be involved in every aspect of our lives.
The NRA was a huge funder of the Trump campaign. I believe it was 30 or 40 million bucks you guys tossed in during the 2016 election. Are you or your colleagues, we're talking with former Congressman Barr of Georgia, who's now on the board of directors of the NRA, Are you or your colleagues beginning to reconsider that support for Donald Trump, given how he has been actually cited as directly cited as the motivation for prior to El Paso 61 murders? I guess this makes it 83 murders and 5 specific terrorist plots. In each case, the person actually said, I'm doing this because of what Donald Trump said, or I am clearly animated by these people. The New Zealand attack, the MAGA bomber, the Waffle House shooting, the Quebec mosque attack. We've got now the attack, the Coast Guard shooter, Christopher Paul Hansen. In every single one of these cases, they directly reference Donald Trump. Is the NRA still standing behind him?
Look, I'm not here to speak for the NRA. I
thought you were.
As Bob Barr. No, I'm not here to speak for the NRA. The NRA has its own spokespeople.
Well, you're on its board. Can you give us speak for yourself?
No,
then are you reconsidering your support for Trump?
For the NRA, I can answer your question.
All right, please speak for yourself.
Well, from my standpoint, it is absolutely absurd to blame the President of the United States because some madman says, I'm doing this because of Donald Trump, any more than a gunman might say, I'm doing this because of something that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says.
How many people have been killed in the name of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez?
I don't know. Do you?
Yes, the answer is 0.
Well, I also know, I just have seen reports that one of the shooters did mention her name. The point is, these shooters, they can mention anybody's name they can. That does not make that person responsible for them. The shooters are responsible for their own actions.
You're talking about the guy in Dayton, Ohio, and he never suggested that he was shooting people for a political reason. This is a guy who was hearing voices.
It doesn't really... The guy in Dayton had posts about in support of Antifa. My point is not to cast blame on any particular individual, 2 or 3 or 4 or 10
The guy
times
in El
removed.
Paso said he specifically was hunting Hispanics because of the Mexican invasion, and he specifically mentioned Donald Trump in his manifesto. I'm not talking about some Facebook post from 2 years earlier.
Are you saying that makes Donald Trump, because his policies are policies that somebody believes he advocates, was the motivation for them going out and murdering people, that Donald Trump was responsible for it?
Yes, I am saying that his hate speech is responsible. Yes, I'm saying that his hate speech is responsible. I'm saying that, and I'm saying that you, and by the you, I mean the plural you, the NRA, the National Rifle Association, you guys at the NRA also bear responsibility for this by filling America's streets with weapons of war.
Well, fine. Does that mean that
and I would like to hear some
groups
contrition.
like the ACLU, which advocate against the death penalty and for drug usage, are responsible for those who commit crimes while under drugs or gang members?
Are you trying to change the subject here, Congressman?
It's not changing the subject. It's simply saying the
ACLU does not advocate.
To one set of facts applies to the other.
So you're saying the ACLU is evil. And that's okay.
That if you follow
and therefore the NRA is evil, and that's okay.
What I'm saying is, if you follow your logic and holding the NRA responsible for the acts of a madman simply because that.
No, I'm holding the NRA responsible for our being 4% of the world's population and having 50% of the world's guns. I'm holding the NRA responsible for literal weapons of war being on our streets.
What weapons of war? These aren't automatic weapons. Automatic weapons may be military, but these are not automatic weapons. None of these people use
are
weapons
of war, sir. These,
no, they're not.
I am a sports shooter.
Weapons.
There is no, and I've fired both fully automatic and semi-automatic weapons over the years, and you and I both know that if you're going duck hunting or you're going deer hunting, and you show up with an AK-47 or a modified civilian version of it or an AR-15, you're going to get laughed out of the room.
No, you're not. The AR-15 is and has been used appropriately for hunting because it is an extremely accurate hunting rifle.
That is not sportsmanship.
What do you mean that's not sportsmanship?
Going out with 30 rounds against it, that is not, okay. So bottom line, it's all good. Is that what you're saying here, Congressman Barr? It's all good. The number of guns that we have in our country, the type of guns we have in our country, Anybody should be able to buy them. You're fine with the president signing this legislation in his first months in office, saying that people who've been, judged mentally ill to the point that they get Social Security disability can now buy guns.
People who have been judged mentally ill are prohibited by federal law going back 4 or 5 decades from possessing a firearm.
People who are on Social Security because of mental illness were unable to buy guns until the Republicans in Congress and the president, when the Republicans controlled the House, the Senate, and the White House, in the first months of his administration, passed and signed a law that said, if you're on Social Security because of mental illness, you can buy a gun again. That's okay with you.
It is not, and it did not say that they were mentally ill. It had to do with whether or not certain aspects of being on Social Security, whether they
were disabled by their mental illness.
Look, I'm not going to sit here and say the NRA was responsible for the acts of a madman, or that the president is, or that anybody in public office is, unless they deliberately and directly advocate that somebody go out and use whatever kind of weapon it is or firearm it is to kill somebody.
Okay.
And the NRA does definitely not do that. Neither does President Trump.